This kind of news that we get on a daily basis now, I could have only dreamed of in 2013, 14. We've got governments buying, we've got, sentiment turning, but the price stagnant. I think we're still in a bull market. Who would take the other side of that? Hey, everybody, this episode of Supply Shock is powered by Core. You're going to hear a lot more about them later in this episode, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Core is the Bitcoin consumer chain. Stake your Bitcoin, explore Bitcoin DeFi, and earn rewards today. Visit stake.coredao.org/blockworks. You'll hear more about them later in the episode.
Bull or bear market, crypto IPOs are coming and retirement products, well, they're being infused with a little bit of Bitcoin. Welcome to Supply Shock. I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, the Bitcoin historian on X. Today's episode is another news roundup with special guests. You know him and love him from Roxham TV, talking about Nolan Bowerly at Count BTC on Twitter. And filling in for Michael McSweeney, who's on a much-deserved holiday, we've got Austin DeNoce of Blockworks. Price right now, $87,000 across major exchanges. So let's dive in. We've got Austin here. He's new, excited, ripping into the market. We've got Nolan, an old, experienced hand. Bull or bear market? I'll start. It certainly feels like the underlying news is mostly bullish. We've got governments buying. We've got, sentiment turning, but the price stagnant. I think we're still in a bull market. Who would take the other side of that?
I can. I'm a perma bull. I'm one of those you're not bullish enough type folks. So you're not going to get any dramatic tension out of me. It's a bull market all the way as far as I'm concerned, especially with the old money printer signaling that it's about to go burr. It looks like quantitative easing is back. It looks like the transitory statement we heard from the Fed chairman 2 weeks ago didn't go over too well. People know the sound of a money printer getting fired up, and people are waiting for it.
Well, this is a low, right? Like, we're down from $110,000. There was all this excitement, right? So there's all the excitement about stuff in Washington. I think we're in a bit of a low. But like, when I look at the news, right, it's just every day it seems like, how could you invent, more bullish stuff when you're talking about, governments starting to kind of, provide regulatory frameworks where businesses can get involved, governments mining Bitcoin, governments potentially buying Bitcoin, at the state level even and the federal level. So I don't know. I feel like, uniquely among the bull market or market cycles, right? Nolan, you and I I think this is our fourth market cycle. This kind of news that we get on a daily basis now, I could have only dreamed of in 2013, 14. The biggest news in 2014 would have been, Microsoft accepted Bitcoin as payments, right? A single kind of retailer doing one thing. Here you're talking about governments saying they want to buy as much Bitcoin as possible, yet the market skeptical. Austin, your take?
Yeah, well, to that point, it's like, how does the news get better? It's like, when in your guys' mind, short of like sovereigns stepping in and starting to buy Bitcoin, I feel like what is the catalyst that actually brings us back? I don't know. I'm a little less constructive in the medium long term. I just feel like there's a lot going on in the U.S. that is not a lot more headwinds than tailwinds. So I'll definitely take the other half of the bull bear in this conversation. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like, once you have the president kind of embracing it, and I don't really see nation states adopting like that quickly, short of maybe like smaller ones like El Salvador or North Korea, which is not exactly the best company to be in.
So it seems like you sort of think that the Bitcoin price can just stay at 80,000 forever. It'll just keep.
No, not forever. I mean, long term, I'm definitely with you guys. I'm more. This is more of like a medium term outlook, like probably like through 2025 or like toward the, I don't know, maybe like Q4. Like, I feel like I'll start probably getting more bullish, but I just feel like there's a lot of headwinds, more on the macro side in the U.S. I mean, with all the debt refinancing we have coming due, and unless, to your point, like you said, QE was maybe around the corner. You never know, but I feel like that's probably a little bit of a later story. I mean, we probably need more liquidity in markets to kind of send us a little bit higher. But yeah, I don't know. In the short term, we maybe have a little bit of bounce, but I feel like I'm not bullish in the next like 6-ish months.
6 months will definitely be back in a bull market. I was gonna say, I think I'm with Arthur Hayes. I think we bottomed, right? I think he was calling for it to end in the low 70s. Look, markets get exuberant. I think this was a sell-off, right? There was people who kind of, were riding the Trump wave. Now Trump's dealing with some of the tough economy stuff. I think it makes sense, but I just think that $87,000. Who are the sellers here? What are the negative catalysts, right? So, you're talking about, okay, what are the positive catalysts? But,
More of a
now what
time
are the
horizon
negative
thing, though.
catalysts?
Like, not necessarily that we're going to fall to, like 50,000 or something like that. It's just, I don't think we're going to be rushing back to all-time highs soon. It's more like we'll be hanging out in like a choppy range for a few months until we get more clarity. Around tariffs to some extent, but I feel like that's less of an issue. It's more just like this refinancing issue where you have a lot of
We're about
debt
to get a
coming due.
wave of 13F filings, right? So the large institutions, have to file kind of quarterly updates on what they're buying and kind of putting into different funds. So we are kind of on the verge of the Q4 filings sort of being unearthed. So we will figure out kind of who has bought Bitcoin, which institutions have added. I think there was Edmund D. Rothschild today came out and said that they had increased their position. So I think we might be kind of hearing who was buying the dip. Of course, Larry Fink the other day, I think, letting the cat out of the bag when, he just openly, I mean, maybe we can talk about Larry Fink and BlackRock just kind of openly talking about how the US dollar could lose reserve currency status. I mean, this is something that maybe, 2 years ago would have sent the market into euphoria just on its own.
Yeah, you're going to see one of the more interesting narratives right there, because it's a degree to which, in the same way that Bitcoin events, for example, the Bitcoin 2021 event out of COVID was the first big global gathering, you kind of saw Bitcoiners fork from the mainstream. We've already seen Bitcoin start to do that in getting out of contango with the stock market. We saw it 2 weeks ago. There was a bit of a market crunch and Bitcoin reacted differently. Now with this GameStop buy, just like you said, you're going to see who's buying Bitcoin, which balance sheets are out there. Of course, GameStop already a big outlier in the stock market. And to watch these two forces collide, watch these two...
Are you bullish? You're bullish on GameStop? Do you think it seems like we're treating GameStop as if it's still the same company as it was in 2021, but it's not still the same company.
But nature abhors a vacuum when it comes to entertainment, for example. There's nothing going on. Disney Snow White already out of cinemas, basically. Nobody cares, right? They can't seem to make a good movie. No, but it's important because GameStop is occupying a piece of our experience in America that's just lacking. People still want to be entertained. They want to have fun. And you don't go to the movies, like they're talking about turning them all into Alamo House now, where you get a beer and like they got pickleball.
I mean, there are still great movies. You saw Nora, right? Best Picture winner.
No, I didn't see any of these terrible.
You don't watch.
I do watch movies if they're good. If I've heard of them and they're good, and
just
people like them.
You've removed yourself from art doesn't mean that.
No, I have not removed myself from anything. I'm waiting for the lower time preference, more entertaining stuff to come. But what I mean to say though is that GameStop is standing at the precipice of a huge audience that is thirsting for entertainment, is thirsting.
Right, but if you're a retail person, you got in the GME euphoria in 2021, you really think they're going to come back? That they're ready for round 2 with a roaring kitty and all that stuff? I don't
well know. That was fun in and of itself. I mean, that was what people did during COVID. It was like just this speculative communal attack type thing that was a lot of fun. And that degeneracy could actually play out when it comes to a lot of these global currencies. I mean, it's going to be hilarious to watch the situation in Canada with their dollar. Got a central banker, the guy whose idea it was to sick and deputize the banking system on the truckers, right? There's a whole bunch of narratives at play right there with other currencies that can be shorted, that can be brought into that spirit, that GME stock.
So you think the rebellious investor spirit is alive and well? Austin, you're more connected, I think, to traditional markets. Do you think there's a demand for the 2021, now 3 years removed, rebellion of that era?
For GameStop, I don't know. I kind of viewed this pivot as just a little bit of a Hail Mary for a dying business. Not that it won't work out, and who knows, maybe their ability to capture mind share is their business at this point, where they can just, I don't know, like a headline like this, all of a sudden people are reinterested in GameStop, and it's
everything's a meme,
it's a household
right?
name at this point. So anything that they do at a certain point can like bring people back in, I suppose. But I don't know. I feel like it's just a company that's lost its way and it's using Bitcoin. Does it really believe in Bitcoin? Did Michael Saylor orange pill them?
Well, that's the thing, is whether you believe in it or not, there's a bunch of businesses who, maybe 7 years ago had Bitcoin on their balance sheet and are a lot wealthier now, right? So the thing is, like, holding Bitcoin over time works, right? So this is the thing that I think is like at the root of it. It's like holding Bitcoin over time preserves your value. And so since that is true, you know, you want to buy Bitcoin now, right? This is actually where I agree with the Trump administration. And, you know, you saw Eric Trump kind of talk about this week, right? He said, you know, other countries are buying. There's only 1.2 million Bitcoin left. And he said it's a race to the finish. And, you know, it's like, that's true, right? Like, so whatever you think about, like, you know, market sentiment right now, the market sentiment of $80,000 is also that every country around the world is sort of looking, okay, this is a geopolitical important asset. There's only 1.2 million left. You know,
the longer term,
GameStop is now buying, right? And look at you know, a great historical example of this would be, you know, the EOS network, right? So like maybe let's go into the alternative cryptocurrency world. EOS is a largely failed cryptocurrency that still holds on its balance sheet 150,000 Bitcoin. EOS can be whatever it wants, you know, like EOS has a lot of
they became CoinDesk,
including a seller. You never know.
They became CoinDesk.
No, yeah, exactly. They went and bought profitable businesses, and like they could do so, right? So Bitcoin's a resource, right? I think you know, if GameStop gets it, GameStop can be sort of whatever it wants, right? Like, because it can reinvent itself, right? Capital.
I mean, what do you guys think is the end game of being this like Bitcoin treasury company? It's just like a bank, essentially.
That's a better question. Yeah, I don't.
Like, what is the point? I mean,
yeah.
In the same way that I think, you know, you hear about this a lot amongst Bitcoiners. Bitcoin changes you, right? There is something that AI has taught me, is that there's no such thing as like rational people. We're all a collection of wants and fears, and then we believe the intelligence.
AI taught you that?
Well, I mean, you look back. Well, it taught me that we can all be prompt engineered. That there's no way to not be prompt engineered. Being susceptible to prompt engineering is because as a human, you're a pattern recognition machine before you're something that's logical. You see patterns, and you can't help but say what's next. If I say 369, your brain is going to fill in the blanks, and you just can't stop that. So you can be prompt engineered pretty easily. And for a long time, we've sort of convinced ourselves that you know, we have this intelligence faculty or something, but it's really just fears and desires, and those motivate us most of the time. And then we sort of backfill in rationality to make that all make sense. But the incentives things are still important. And this is where you see the companies and sort of the forking that I was mentioning earlier. It's what Michael Saylor's been saying for a long time. Companies that are so worried about short-term capital gains for their stockholders, so worried about the short term all the time, never really had this motivation to grow their companies in certain ways. And that's what brought Michael Saylor to Bitcoin in the first place. It was the control it gave him over the long-term planning of the company. So just like an individual, just like there is this feedback loop where it teaches people subconsciously about time preference and lowering their time preference, it can do that to some of these companies on the balance sheet. They don't have to live in the same hamster wheel that we see, you know, whatever we call them, W-2 filers in America, right? This idea of like,
yeah, I think like, here's the idea is maybe EOS is just a low time preference company, right?
Yeah.
Great argument.
They did their 1 year long token sale. That was their low. That was the introduction to the low time.
And now, you know, if it takes them 20 years to figure out what to do with the business, that's just a low time preference, right? That's
the 4D chess argument.
Have the money. They have to do whatever they want. Well, no, it's sort of like, you know, we had Trace Mayer on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and he said, like, you know, the golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rules, and the golden rule now is he who has the Bitcoin makes the rules. And right, like a Bitcoin, like, guys, an early Bitcoiner paid for his own space flight, is in space right now.
I know, it's
right now, as we're talking.
When he confirmed for us that there is no, in fact, human activity on Antarctica, that it's just white, and it's round. So in case we're all wondering, don't trust verify. We had an actual pier up in space.
HODLing isn't enough anymore. Bitcoin is evolving on Core, unlocking yield, utility, and a thriving DeFi ecosystem. With over 250 dApps and nearly $1 billion in total value locked, Bitcoin DeFi is growing fast. Hundreds of thousands of users are already staking, lending, and building on Core's high-speed, low-fee rails. Now it's your turn. Whether you're a user or a builder, the Core Ignition program rewards you for participating in Bitcoin's next evolution. Unlock your Bitcoin and use Core. Start earning with Ignition today at ignition.coredao.org/blockworks. For the past decade, Ledger has been the global leader in digital asset security, trusted to secure more than 20% of the world's crypto assets. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger is making digital ownership more secure and accessible with their latest products, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. These wallets feature the world's first secure touchscreens, simplifying your digital transactions while ensuring uncompromising security through Ledger's secure chip and proprietary OS. Plus, with the Ledger Security Key app, you can say goodbye to traditional passwords and step up your digital protection. Ready to protect your assets? Choose the most trusted name in hardware wallets, Ledger, and take control of your digital security today at ledger.com. Unlock the power of your Bitcoin with Ledn. For over 6 years, Ledn has helped thousands hodl their Bitcoin while accessing liquidity, focusing on transparency, security, and trust. Learn what your Bitcoin can do for you and see why so many clients trust Ledn. Visit ledn.io to learn more.
There's a Bitcoin legend on the moon. Like right now, he's orbiting.
Yeah, he is.
On a space flight that he paid for with money that he mined on like a beat Chinese computer in Western China when he was like 21 in 2011. Like that's a real thing for Chun Wang's life.
Yeah. He captains that. She's the captain.
He's the captain, right? Yeah. He grew up in Western China, like rural China. Nothing to look forward to. Built Bitcoin mines, became a big miner, survived everything, survived all the tumult of the early industry, and he is currently orbiting space.
With motion sickness, by the way, so that's what it'll do.
Right, I saw that. Yeah. Well, this is the part of the Bitcoin story. It's like as much as people want to make the kind of things that Michael Saylor say unreal, or just cast doubt on. This is what I was saying earlier about kind of getting to like a moral position on Bitcoin. It's like that's true. Like for someone, that's their life experience. Their life experience is that they ran a program on their computer and now they're so rich that they're flying to space. That is like their life. That happened to them. And so, how do you, and like the other example would be Jen McCaleb. There was a Bloomberg article about him. Like he launched Mt. Gox, sold it to the guy who ruined it. Is building a space station. He's building not even a rocket. He's building a space station. Yeah. I'm talking about Jen McCaleb.
He's got to go chill.
He's building a space station. So like this is the people who have kept their money in Bitcoin for the longest time. Like this is what's happening. Like this is what they're doing. And sure, okay, are they selling some of that Bitcoin now to fund these things? Sure. I'm sure. I'm sure Chun sold some Bitcoin to get on that space flight with X. I think money well spent because now he's, there's pictures of him an astronaut for all time. I would never get on that.
No, he said it was much easier, but it's the motion sickness that scared me. I didn't know anything about that. I can't deal with. I get seasick even. I was on a catamaran the other day.
I mean, I have like nightmares about being in a rocket. The idea of being shot in a rocket.
I'm okay here with the Bitcoin on Earth. They can.
The one that got me was like his legs like dangling out like the window.
I saw that. Yeah. Not doing it. I actually just tried to hang out. I didn't even know about the space thing, but I noticed he was, because that's all he does is travel around the world. Yeah. And he happened to have been on an island next to me just about 3 weeks ago. And so I DM'd him because I've talked to him many times. And I said, hey, if you're on, come see me, and it didn't work out, but then I see him in the news going up to space. So
we were trying to, I was trying to pitch him on writing an article about the space flight for Bitcoin magazine at one point. And I think it would have been such a good.
Well, that was one thing that we did try 2 years ago, that rocket that exploded. Didn't we have Bitcoin on that? We had actually put Bitcoin on that rocket to go to space.
Well, yeah, what happened then is that there was a physical BitMEX, the company whose co-founders were pardoned this week to bring it back to the news roundup element. Funded a space mission. And as part of that mission, they were going to put a physical Bitcoin on the moon, but that rocket did explode.
But Bitcoin Magazine was part of it. I remember that was in our all hands. Like our rocket crashed, and we think we lost the Bitcoin.
Yeah, there's a edition of Bitcoin Magazine that's called the To the Moon issue about a rocket that exploded.
That was. I mean, it was a great. I'm happy to have been a part of that. I'm sad that the rocket.
I think, again, I'm just trying to get to Austin here. It's like, okay, so what do you do with that information? Like, so you're saying, okay, like GME. Like, okay, maybe it's a scam, like maybe holding their Bitcoin's a bad idea. It's like, okay, well, it's like, what do you do with these stories where it's like, this is how much Bitcoin has appreciated and this is how well Bitcoin works as a store of value.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying it's a bad thing for them to save in Bitcoin or add it to their balance sheet. I just think the reasons are important here because I don't know if this is really supporting it or if they're just trying to capitalize on opportunity. But does it really matter if it's like incentives attract people to Bitcoin, and that's kind of the point. So I don't know if it's that big of an issue. I just I don't know. Like I feel like it would be more valuable to see an interesting company or like a successful company start doing this, because that's more I guess like constructive to me. It's like, oh, they actually understand or embrace it. Whereas, like what does
like a
GameStop have to
BlackRock.
lose? Like it's, if you get like a major company that starts buying and
Yeah, but
saving in Bitcoin, that's a little bit different. That's more of a green light for the
What about
industry.
what about BlackRock though? I mean, they seem like a company, right?
Yeah, they've embraced it, but like I mean, are they saving Bitcoin like as part of like a treasury
Well, they have
asset?
a lot of it.
but Tesla is a good example though. Tesla is a good example, and SpaceX, the very company we're talking about, SpaceX, they have Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and that I would say was the real top of the 2021 market.
This is, I think, like the bit of the crypto mindset of like, what are you doing with it? What are you doing with it? You're holding your value outside of the government dollar system that is like torpedoing down to zero. Like that is what you're doing. You're just holding it outside of that. What we've found over the years is just holding your money outside of that apparatus. Seems to be the use case. But we'll see. Wall Street games continue. Maybe we'll go to the Circle IPO. So this is something this week we've predicted and talked on the show about this kind of coming wave of IPOs, right? That there would be the sort of Trump taking office, kind of crypto companies being empowered through legislation and regulation. We're starting to see that now. Gemini a couple weeks ago filing confidentially for an IPO. Now we've got Circle, the stablecoin issuer, of course, challenging the dominant offshore Tether. Certainly a lot of drama there over the last few weeks. Circle IPO, maybe we'll start with you, Austin. Why is this interesting? Why is this notable? What are you watching?
Well, I mean, I think it's just showing that we're really embracing stablecoins. And it's stablecoins kind of operating this middle ground of like crypto and not crypto. And I feel like that's probably why it's a good stepping stone. And it's kind of hard for people in the government to really be against it, because it's so helpful to, like financing deficits and continuing US dollar hegemony. So I feel like so many incentives to line up where it makes sense. Overall, like it's a win. I think it's a great thing. I mean, they're great companies. They're basically money printers, to be honest. They're like, they're money market funds, but they, give the access to that to everybody, like globally. I mean, Circle to a lesser extent than Tether for sure. But yeah, also this is coinciding with the Genius Act. So I feel like it's probably timed around that a little bit, just like peak stablecoin sentiment. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's good. It's about time we get another, I guess, quasi crypto IPO. But
I don't know what the demand will be for Circle's IPO, but certainly it will be interesting to see. Yeah, there was Brian Armstrong from Coinbase was out on CNBC making the rounds yesterday, sort of talking it up and basically saying it's a way to kind of bring interest, sort of talking about stablecoins as a way to bring the kind of interest people get with treasuries, like in a more democratized way, right? Like people talking about people with bank accounts are not making much money on the interest. Stablecoins offering an alternative to that. I'm a bit skeptical. Nolan, your feelings?
Well, two things. So just the IPO wave and then the stablecoin piece. So the IPO wave to me is just this, that's the spoils of war. That's what the industry got for going all in with the administration that won. They were more or less Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, and Hester Pierce, the chair of the SEC, the two relevant parties for the IPOs, are the industry was heavily consulted on for those choices, let's say. So you're seeing the input, the spoil of war, what the industry got for such support. I think about a third of Trump's campaign money came from the cryptocurrency, the wider crypto industry. So there had to be a lot of, tit for tat, quid pro quo, or whatever you want to call it. That's the way politics work, of course. So it looks like there's going to be a bunch more of these. So I wouldn't say this is anywhere near the end. Now, to the question of stablecoins themselves, I remember your initial take on this, Pete, and I've copied it ever since. This is one of the things you taught me.
Is this the printer thing?
It is the printer.
Oh
yeah,
my God.
It is the printer.
Okay.
It works. The printer actually works. I continue to use it, which is, we are entering this era where, and for a bank.
Well, explain it to us.
Definitely. So first of all, the first part of it is that banks used to be in the business of issuing gold-backed money, or just seigniorage. It's called printing actual money. And if you go to the state of Hong Kong, that's what those banks do. Those banks are money printers, because they have a stable coin US dollar. In Hong Kong, the Hong Kong dollar is a 7-to-1 pegged US dollar that is created and minted by the banks themselves. So when you go to Hong Kong, the actual bills come from the individual banks. So they're different. The same amount of money but the bills are issued from the banks themselves. So it's like a Circle and a Tether, except that's how the actual money comes out. Now, we were talking because, there's a lot of people poo-pooing stablecoins when they first came out. I thought they were amazing from day one. I said, this is actually incredible. This is them getting into the actual business of money printing. And Pete gave probably the most interesting take on it, which was that stablecoins are a bridge between the digital and the analog world, in the same way that the printer was in the 1980s. So when you had an operating system, we didn't have social media yet. You didn't have Facebook or X or YouTube. You didn't have text. You didn't have chat apps that could share all this information. Really what you had were word processors, and the one way to get the usefulness of the word processor out into the world was a printer. And printers came with every computer that was in anyone's living room. And remember they always had their own room in the house back
right?
then.
Yeah,
It was like the computer room, right?
Well, yeah, I think what I was trying to get out of that is that printers, if you think about like where money was made on computers, an equal amount of money with now nobody maybe
and they still don't work.
Right. They still and it's ironic here because these printers will be money printed. They are money printers.
Yeah.
But I mean, the analogy here is that, people made millions and billions of dollars off of printers, but printers essentially, in order to get, you would mail, I remember in high school, it's like you would mail a file to your teacher who would print it out and then they would, edit the paper. Right. So like, I think stablecoins to me were always that window of, eventually, and like today, I think most people live printer free, right? I think the amount of times I interact with a printer these days, thanks to DocuSign, is like mercifully low. I maybe print out one thing.
I believe things that come out of a printer are just garbage, and they should be treated as garbage. They're not allowed in my house. Just stay out.
Right, but the device saturation is so high now where you can kind of avoid printers, right? And there will be a post printer period, right? So I think the analogy with stablecoins here is there's probably going to be some large period of time where they are useful for helping people make that step transition, right? So like people have money and they want to get money on a blockchain. That's the printer, right? And then to get it out, use the printer. So that's the stablecoin. But there's probably going to be a time like now where the amount of things that we use a printer for is less than 5%, and ultimately that will go to zero, right? Like ultimately that will go away. So it's a way to describe, I think, a technology that is an interesting phenomenon, right? It's not saying that you can't be successful selling printers. Like I'm sure there are people who are, they own Hawaiian villas that made printers.
They sound kind of bearish on stablecoins. I mean, you don't see this as like kind of the beginning. I mean, I feel like it's the addressable market is crazy, and it's just kind of like a more innovative version of the dollar, passing on yield to people.
Stablecoins are like the ugly, weird thing that Bitcoin created that is actually awful, and they're like, it's a net bad that they were created. Where it's like all the things with the existing financial system now get to live and extend through Bitcoin, through stablecoins.
So you don't like it because it's kind of like continuing the old guard a little bit?
Oh, this is terrible, right? I mean, it allows the United States to continue its influencing the world through dollar money printing at a level. I mean, there's going to be this is the thing about the, America First Bitcoiners are an attack on Bitcoin. And primarily one of the things they are doing is they're furthering the American empire by using cryptocurrency. That's expressly what they want.
Because it's, helping the US, strengthening the, the empire or whatever. That's why I mean, that empire is there's going to be a couple interesting second order effects of that, right? So like if you're a country in Africa or Latin America, because that's where primarily these stablecoins are going to be exported to, they're not going to be exported to Europe, they're not going to be exported to Asia, they're going to go to Latin America and Africa where there are vulnerable communities. So now those people are going to adopt stablecoins rather than Bitcoin. So what's going to come with those stablecoins? You think so? I mean, but isn't it the same argument against the dollar? Like, wouldn't you choose Bitcoin over the dollar?
It is the dollar.
Well, I know, but why? Obviously, they don't have access to the dollar now, and that's why stablecoins would maybe be helpful. But they're still making the decision. I mean, in the marketplace.
The second part of our argument is that if you believe that those countries have legitimate sovereignty, then that sovereignty is now impeded by the United States, right? So, if you're a country in Latin America, you can no longer now act as a sovereign power and through the use of your own government. Let's say citizens in those countries that are democracies who vote for things and then want to get those things funded, they can no longer use their own currencies to do so.
Unless they do Bitcoin.
Isn't that kind of what Bitcoin aims to do, though?
No, I don't think so.
Well,
No,
like
because I think
disenfranchised local governments that are abusing their fiat privileges because you can opt
yes, but
out
you're
by going to
substituting
Bitcoin.
that. You're substituting that with a completely neutral network that nobody operates, whereas the stable coin is still operated
Totally.
by
I
the
mean,
US government.
He's talking about a place like
totally. Like a Bitcoin would be better in that regard, but it's kind of the lesser of two evils in terms of the fiat choices.
No, it's not. And that's
it's like to take my island where I spend winters in Barbados. They are the same. They have a 2-to-1 stable coin US dollar, 2-to-1 conversion. It's always worth two Barbados dollars or one, but they have capital controls. So they can't hedge and they can't adapt based on what's going on. When Jerome Powell hits the money printer in a few weeks, their government is flat-footed. There's literally nothing they can do. They could try to keep up and issue bonds themselves or whatever, but it ain't going to work. And all they can do is maybe let their own people squirm a little more by raising capital controls, but everyone there is capital.
Yeah, we're subsidizing the American empire by exporting dollars that are then furthering that apparatus. So if you are someone who comes from the perspective of like thinking that apparatus, is problematic for the world, then I think that
totally. And I'm definitely in that camp. I guess I'm just saying if someone has a smartphone and they have access to stable coins, they presumably have access to Bitcoin too. So like, why are they making that decision? Like they can save in Bitcoin, but I feel like for a lot of these people in other countries, it's like the volatility is not necessarily their friend because they don't have, the luxury.
Well, so what does the stability come with, right? The stability is going to come with in the same way that like Google and Facebook and these other kind of private companies like spy on you and sell your data to like other people. Like that is going to come with the stable coin, right? So like, how is money going to be made off the stable coin? Well, where does the yield come from? Like, where does the
US
come from? Sure, but I think some of it is also going to become, what are they doing with the data that they're, gleaning from?
It was like the CBDC argument a little bit. Look, I get it, and I'm not, I don't necessarily.
Well, stablecoins are CBDCs; they're just a private market operated CBDC.
But I would imagine at some point there's, a government entity looking over Circle's shoulder or whatever it is. Maybe less so Tether, who knows? But anyway, I just. I'm not necessarily advocating for
we're blackfilling you here.
Well, look, I'm not advocating for like furthering U.S. hegemony and the dollar or anything like that. I just think the dollar is technically better than a lot of these local currencies, and if people want to opt into stable coins,
better for who and for what, right?
Well, better for the people in those countries. I mean, you can hate on the U.S. all you want, but 3% inflation is relatively stable compared to a lot of the debasement that they see in other places. And like they could still get Bitcoin, and I would advocate for that if they have the money, I guess. But having options is fine. Like if people want to choose stable coins, like that's up to them. And I think, as people often say, the dollar is the least dirty shirt of all the dirty shirts that are fiat currencies. And if stable coins allow people to get a hold of the least dirty shirt and get rid of their local currency that is being debased way more, there's way worse capital controls, whatever it is. I feel like that's a step in the right direction. Obviously, I get the point that it's you don't want to support the system that you're kind of working against with Bitcoin.
And just this idea, like you said, of least dirty shirt. I mean, having other buyers of U.S. debt allows for a lot more optionality in terms of even how the Fed props up other coins. When I said the global degens that will attack the Canadian dollar if things go south over there, you would have had a swap line opened up with the Fed Reserve during the 2022 truckers thing. That's not there this time. There is they don't need the Canadian business, let's say, to buy US debt. They don't need to create this bailout mechanism for other countries anymore. A lot of these other fiat currencies are now.
Yeah, I think what you're missing is it goes away everywhere, and it's not. I'm using Latin America and Africa as examples, but it's also like Canada is going to lose the ability. Like everybody who's not the United States, maybe China, and there's been a few interesting like. Kaishin has really started reporting on Bitcoin stuff a lot more, and I think that the Chinese conversation will eventually pivot to them launching some sort of stable yuan. But then, Michael Saylor's point is that nobody wants the yuan, and so I think you're going to end up with, the United States dollar through the stablecoin apparatus survives, and it becomes, none of these countries will be able to, maybe the euro survives, but you'll have a mass consolidation. But through that consolidation, like the people will lose their ability. The political environments require the currency to be manipulated by the political. So this is how democracy works, right? It's like a lot of the things that are publicly funded are funded now through financial engineering rather than direct taxation. and a lot of that will just go away. And I think some of the countries that haven't, they're not going to be happy with that. And I think, like, from the argument of like, oh, do those people in those jurisdictions have true autonomy? Well, they're going to have to vote for things, and then they're going to, their only option will be to pay for it through taxation. So if you're looking at what's going to happen to Europe, well, Europe is going to have a huge problem because Europe primarily funds itself through those mechanisms.
The only thing better than stacking sats is staking them. With Core's self-custodial Bitcoin staking, you can earn yield on your BTC without ever giving up custody, no new trust assumptions, no counterparties, and no slashing risk. Still your keys, still your coins, now your yield. Here's how it works. Lock your Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network. Help elect a Core validator and start earning Core rewards, passively, securely, and without risk to your principal. And with dual staking, you can boost rewards by staking Core tokens alongside your Bitcoin. Institutions can also tap into Bitcoin at scale with top custodians. Don't let your Bitcoin sit idle, put it to work. Visit stake.core.dao/blockworks to start staking today. For the past decade, Ledger has been the global leader in digital asset security, trusted to secure more than 20% of the world's crypto assets. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger is making digital ownership more secure and accessible with their latest products, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. These wallets feature the world's first secure touchscreens, simplifying your digital transactions while ensuring uncompromising security through Ledger's secure chip and proprietary OS. Plus, with the Ledger Security Key app, you can say goodbye to traditional passwords and step up your digital protection. Ready to protect your assets? Choose the most trusted name in hardware wallets, Ledger, and take control of your digital security today at ledger.com. If you've been around Bitcoin for long enough, you've heard the term HODL and the name Ledn. Ledn has been the go-to specialist in Bitcoin lending for over 6 years. Ledn helps you unlock the liquidity of your BTC, allowing you to HODL while still accessing the wealth of your Bitcoin. Ledn has been battle-tested with a focus on transparency, security, and trust. This has allowed them to build a proven track record of client success and security, helping tens of thousands of clients harness the value of their digital assets with confidence and peace of mind. Learn for yourself why so many clients trust Ledn by checking out Ledn's Trustpilot or their reviews on social media. And to learn more about what your Bitcoin can do for you, check out ledn.io.
All right, let's turn the page. We've got Fidelity today launching a Bitcoin and crypto retirement account. Bitcoin eating into the upper echelons of finance, becoming more ingrained with the regular products. Obviously, there's been some sort of Bitcoin native versions of this product before, BitIRA, some other, kind of early retirement accounts, allowing people to kind of get exposure to Bitcoin through retirement. This is bullish. Is this bullish, Nolan? Your take? Retirement accounts going Bitcoin?
Well, people have called it this big wealth transfer. We've been anticipating this wealth transfer forever, that the boomers were going to give up all the money, and then the millennials and
they're hanging on.
Right, all this, we heard it for years. The wealth transfer, I will argue, is eventually not between generations, but between NPCs and Bitcoiners, and people who simply don't understand that the reality of the world is changing underneath them very quickly, and that Bitcoin is going to be for people who have high net worth. And how are you going to, in a world where we're talking about, the US dollar, QE, it's going directly into politics. I believe that the US dollar is going to be what it was set out to be in the first place: government money, political policy money, food stamps, otherwise known as food stamps. And that's why it's even ironic. We had a food stamp debate this week in America about, whether you can buy Coca-Cola on food stamps or not, and what's going on with the Coca-Cola, the whole thing with the, So anyway, the food stamps, that's where it's headed, and it doesn't look like there's any way that
the basis for that analogy. It's the food stamps is money from the government that can only apply to certain things. So the money, if there's enough restrictions on it, essentially becomes food stamps. Right?
Yeah. Consumption money, basically what you experience today in Argentina, for example. Argentina, where the peso is, you can only really pay for coffee or Coca-Cola or other things like that, consumable items, with the peso. You can't tell how much money you make or how much your car costs or how much your home costs in the local currency, because it's too volatile. So you refer to it in US dollars. You can't really refer to it in your local food stamps. And so the analogy is more or less that as we go forward in this schism, in this split, And we see that there really is a fracture in the economy. And that's what Michael Saylor's been talking about. That's why we call them or meme was so powerful, why it took off so quickly, right? People who save in dollars, and the song and all that stuff. And so
take off. Yeah, I mean, I guess that permeated
for a little while, you know, a little while. So you're going to see, I think you're going to continue to see this schism. And again, it's not generational, but this does give, I think, a really good opportunity for the boomers, who were great teachers. They were great teachers as a generation. They did a lot of interesting and amazing things. And this will be the thing that can save a lot of them. But a lot of them are indeed swept up in a lot of that. You know, they're not the most likely Bitcoiners. Of course, Bitcoin has broken down in generational lines, and it was not well received by that particular generation. So perhaps a way to catch up. I'm bullish on this. I think it's a great thing for them.
Well, there's some great Bitcoin boomers out there. We've got Gary Leland, who is the Bitcoin boomer, having a conference out in Austin this week. So we'll go over to Austin. Retirement accounts, from your perspective, this is good for Bitcoin.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess increasing all the roads to buying Bitcoin is better. You know, like if people who have money can't buy Bitcoin because their retirement account doesn't let them, and then you allow them, I feel like that has to be net bullish. I forget, was Fidelity like the lone holdout for not offering crypto?
No, there's still some. No, there's still some holdouts. Vanguard.
Well, like the main was it Vanguard? I know there was one where they were, I don't know, they like opted out of like listing some of them.
That was Vanguard, yeah. So I think this was, and there was a senator, I can't remember from where, who introduced some legislation this week. I think it was Senator Tuberville. You know, the Financial Freedoms Act. It was primarily to kind of stop this embargo. So I think what's happened really on Wall Street is that, you know, some firms are still, and I think Eric Trump actually did a good job of talking about this on Fox News this week, kind of talking about it was debanking, you know, and kind of political attacks to the banking system that pushed him, you know, into the, you know, kind of crypto world. But I think, again, like kind of talking about this idea that this is still happening on Wall Street, right? There's still sort of an institutional distaste for the asset class.
You even had Bill Maher, who had dinner with the Trumps this week. And I remember on my morning show, I wrote a headline because Bill Maher was laughing when Trump was candidate in early 2024, complaining about this fact that he was debanked. And my headline that day was laughing all the way to debank. And my prediction was simply that it was going to drive the Trumps into the Bitcoin world. And it did. It drove them directly into the orbit. I mean, laughing, being debanked already is an awful feeling. We've all been there as Bitcoiners. It really is a rough thing to get the letter to be kicked out, especially when you're just trying to do normal business. And we've all been there. It continues to be a problem. And it feels like a violation of your rights. I remember complaining about it to a friend once, and he's like, "But you're a Canadian citizen." And I was like, "What are you talking about? What is that? Do you understand what you're saying? Do I walk into a bank and say, I'm a citizen and I have bank rights?" They'll laugh you out of the building. It hasn't been a thing for a long time. So to be laughed at about it, I know exactly what that feels like when people don't take debanking seriously. It's really a terrible feeling. And it did indeed radicalize Donald Trump. I think he noticed right away that this was a major issue and that a lot of people were being affected by it. And indeed, it brought Eric Trump into the fold. Debanking was a real thing. I know what they did to Signature Bank. Signature Bank was a powerful utility. Everybody used it in the Bitcoin exchange world. They had built a sort of clearinghouse inside Signature Bank to help all the exchanges settle accounts at the end of every day with like sort of off-ledger type stablecoin thing. I don't know what was going on, but it helped them settle accounts and all that. And it just happened to be Donald Trump's bank. And they got shut down by Choke Point 2.0, right? They were part of the Silicon Valley Bank that got shut down. So we saw targeted lack of aid and support to the banks that had banked our industry for a long time. It was an actual war on the industry. It was no laughing matter. And to see this stuff started to switch is, I think, a great thing. And to see the president really be brought into this industry because he was debanked and because people laughed at him about complaining about being debanked. Imagine.
It's just, well, it's still pretty common, right? I think people, and this is a side effect of kind of some of the COVID era stuff, right? People want, private institutions to kind of punish people, right? Just to kind of dole out punishment, right? So there was a lot of people who kind of, took that as a positive. So I don't know. I think that's the question is, where do we go forward with debanking? How do we go from someplace where debanking, where people get rights to access financial institutions, aren't these ultimately just private businesses that can act as they would like, Nolan?
Well, that's what people always say, right? They're private businesses and this and that. But this kind of censorship has been an actual industry. We've seen it. We had Mike Benz speaking at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville. He's sort of been instrumental in talking about this architecture of deceit, how this stuff works. You know, that you can actually predict, for example, CIA operations in different countries right when you start to see remittance markets start to shoot upwards, because what you're seeing is wealthy people being brought over to repatriate money and to send money through these different channels to fund different activities when it comes to whatever dialogue, whatever cause is being promoted in that area. And you can actually look in remittance markets as a predictive model to see where US interference is happening in different jurisdictions. It's an amazing fact that I had no idea about until he brought that up. So this is indeed a real thing. And we've seen censorship of people using, you know, the same thing happened with X, right? For years we heard, oh, if you don't like it and you could be kicked off, why don't you build your own X? Well, then someone went out and actually bought it and did it. And then there was another thing to complain about. It never ended. Then it was, oh, you kicked out the censors, even though you bought your own X and you now say what you feel like on X, but you got to follow these rules. So we've seen this business model around for a long time. USAID was a lot about this. A lot of the cuts that have actually absolutely shocked Americans were about how this information and money was laundered together. And it continues to be a problem. And if you go after the banks, but it's got to be, you got to have a lot more transparency in the system before we can make those kinds of choices. You have to be able to see a lot more about where the flow of funds goes, who's behind certain money. Then I'd say, sure, why not? But I'd rather, you know, with Bitcoin, it doesn't matter who you are. You can't actually censor individuals from using it if you use some of the tools that are out there. And so it gets over the point. I think we're going to be past the point where you can deputize the banking sector to do this stuff for you, though. I mean, that was one of the first realizations I had. You know, we saw this week that the whole story about Social Security fraud. Social Security fraud is one of the original stories that brought me to Bitcoin, because I found out how rampant it already was over 10 years ago. And once you realize that the banks weren't doing the job they were signed up for, to be the deputies of law enforcement, to follow the money, it had been that way ever since Al Capone and Elliot Ness and all that stuff. And it just didn't work anymore. Basically, you had to get back to actually catching criminals. You couldn't just tell the banks, oh, you go find it for us and you go look in the paperwork. And that wasn't going to work anymore. And you weren't going to be able to do it that way. And we saw that with the Social Security fraud system. We saw it with the actual, I mean, if you remember Andreas Antonopoulos, the way he would teach us about information security systems and the onion approach, and you store all the data in one place, and then you try and make these walls that keep it inaccessible. But that, by actually storing the data, is what made it a target. You had to rethink the architecture. You had to think of security and privacy by design in order to get over these problems, because you were making everyone too vulnerable. Just like the white paper says, a certain amount of fraud has become expected in the system. And so that's what we've seen with this stuff for years now, and exactly why we have to build different systems that make police be police and bankers bankers. Bankers have no business getting involved in who, what, where, when, why. Send the money, shut your mouths, beat it.
Well, we're going to end on one final story. Bringing it back to Eric Trump for a second. This American Bitcoin mining company launched this week. Obviously, had a couple of reports about the amount of activity that is taking place in the U.S. with mining. Thoughts now on the pendulum swinging? Is U.S. mining too much of a powerhouse? You know, maybe 4 years ago we went from China being the dominant, part of the Bitcoin network. Now the United States, I think at this week, Foundry discovered 9 consecutive blocks. This is a U.S.-based mining pool. A concern. Nolan, your closing thoughts.
I think it's, if we're not concerned about the potential energy gap, let me just find this quote, because I had it on my story this morning, the Awakening, every morning at 8 a.m. Eastern time over on Roxen TV. Let me just find it here. Yes, this comes from a hydroelectric dam that's going in China, and it cost them about $137 billion to make. It's going to actually reshape the entire river flow of Southeast Asia. It's on the border with India. Just an incredible specimen. And Elon Musk actually spoke about it. He said, As I said a few years ago, the AI scaling constraint will move from chips to voltage transformers to electricity generation. And he said this is worrying for US leadership in AI long term. Anytime you're talking about an AI data center, you're also talking about a Bitcoin mine. And again, Bitcoin mining offers the financing tools available to start making a lot of decentralized grid building possible. We have to have an energy boom in America, and there's only a few ways to do that. If you go back to how we were able to build grid infrastructure when we still had a manufacturing base, I mean, the River Rouge, I guess the Red River by the Detroit plant where Ford built a lot of automobiles. Remember, they built their own power plant because you had a guaranteed buyer of electricity. You had the Ford Motor Company that was going to buy all that electricity. So it made it easy to build electrical infrastructure. We forgot that over the past years by making the economy stuffed with financial engineers as our main, where sort of the wealthiest, best and brightest were attracted to where they went. We don't have that manufacturing base anymore. So we've let governments become the main driving force behind energy systems, municipal governments, state governments, federal governments, and they're not good at it. It's not a good look. Like, they're not good at it, right? They haven't built a nuclear reactor in years. But also last week we had Oklo, who now got a special license to systematize their permits for their small modular nuclear reactors. They are in fact Bitcoin miners. They're already doing it. They're already mining Bitcoin at the Oklo reactor. And so you're going to get this opportunity now to have a new funding mechanism to decentralize the grid, build more energy systems. So it has nothing to do with how much mining we actually have. The real story behind our Bitcoin mining, and who cares about it relative to the rest of the world, is that it can actually finance what has to happen in America, the decentralization of the American electrical grid and the increased robustness of the grid. We need way more energy. And we're not going to get there if we leave it up to municipal governments. We're only going to get there if we leave it up to the private sector, who's going to say, build a mine there, build a mine there, build a mine there. We don't care. The people around doesn't matter. Build a mine. We're going to build a Bitcoin citadel if we need to. Just stick it with people. Let's go. And
of course, other countries waking up to that. There was a couple other small news notes. I'll note Pakistan proposing a $3.5 billion investment in Bitcoin mining, and a French digital minister out this week talking about sustainable energy Bitcoin mining being something that
this is exactly what I'm talking about.
A fringe issue that should be taken seriously. So even in the halls of the European Union, some waking up to the American or the energy potential of mining. Austin, your thoughts on American Bitcoin in general?
You mean like the mining centralization, or just broadly?
Yeah, your take.
Well, I mean, to the centralization point, like I don't know how much of it is a concern unless you're worried about the government cracking down, because it's not like these companies are all like, I mean, I'm assuming they're all, I mean, different companies. I don't follow the Bitcoin mining industry that closely, but they're not like all connected, or it's not like the government is necessarily going to crack down, especially this one. So that doesn't concern me as much. But I think to Nolan's point, I mean, the energy is life. You really need to figure out a way to get to abundant energy if you want any of this stuff to materialize. And for, I don't know, I mean, so many things. Everything's downstream of energy. And so, yeah, I don't know. If Bitcoin mining can bring more energy online, obviously that's great for the country. And I whatever really way we can get more energy, I'm definitely in the nuclear camp, but that takes, like a decade or more to really come.
These small modulars will be faster, I think. I think it'll
so?
take a lot.
I'm no nuclear physicist over here, so I'll take your word for it.
Well, one day soon, hopefully, we'll all be orbiting space like Xu Wang out there. Salute you if you're watching. Appreciate it. It's been a Supply Shock podcast on Blockworks. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and more. If you're watching there, you can feel free to hit that like or subscribe button. If you're watching on X, give us a comment or a retweet. We'll be headed to New York City again this June for Permissionless, premier Bitcoin and crypto developer conference. I'll be there bringing a Bitcoin focus to some panels and talks. Still in the works, with much more to come. We'll see you later. This has been a Supply Shock podcast.